So in December, I ended up making a video on Amphibia Season 3. I was really loving Amphibia at the time and wanted to express that somewhere once the first half of the season ended. People seemed to like that video, and I figured that I might as well make a follow-up one once the show returned for its final episodes. Well, that happened way sooner than I could have anticipated, because it was announced that Amphibia was returning in March, along with the Owl House. I'd have two shows to look forward to every Friday night. But now, both shows have reached some form of a conclusion. Owl House has finished its second season, and Amphibia, well, Amphibia's done now. The show has finished its story, leaving me both very satisfied, but also creating a giant frog-shaped hole in my heart. The best thing I can do to fill it is to talk about it here. If you want to catch up on all my previous thoughts on Amphibia, you can find that in the previous video on the show. Alright, so this is the part where I start giving my thoughts, right? Amphibia really is the kind of show that grows on you the more you watch it, huh? Even as the show progressively got better and the story continued to expand, you start to appreciate how a lot of the older episodes built up all these plot lines and made them all really engaging to go through by Season 3. Now, despite my praise of the first half of Season 3, it seems like there was some criticism of how the show suddenly became more relaxed after True Colors. Plus, it seems like a lot of people were missing Amphibia as a location and its characters. Luckily, the show knew exactly when to shift gears, with the opening episode of 3B, Escape to Amphibia. Mr. X returns being more of a threat than he ever has before, a bunch of characters return from the previous episodes, and Anne and the Planters make their way back to Amphibia. This episode also acts as a really nice cap-off to Anne's parents. We're gonna see them again after this, but this is the last big show of their relationship with Anne. They went from not believing in how much he's grown in Amphibia, to now 100% believing in her, and supporting her mission to stop Andrias. It really can't be said enough how good of characters Anne's parents are. They're honestly some of the best animated parents I can even recall. They were the perfect blend of comedy and heartfelt, while still being involved in conflicts and playing their part. Oh yeah, and there's a scene where Darth Vader, hallway, Rogue One is referenced, and it's 10 out of 10. Okay, so for the next couple of episodes, we're back in Amphibia as you join Sasha and all the Wartwood residents and their resistance. If the first half of Season 3 was like Sonic X in its concept, this half is more like Sonic Sad AM. The robots even look like egg ponds if we want to continue these Sonic parallels. The world is all in ruin, there's a bunch of mechanization, all the characters are not like freedom fighters, and these episodes have the characters doing stuff to prepare for the invasion of Earth. Commander End is more meant to flesh out Sasha's character, after all this time of not seeing her. It's a believable change for a character to go from being a control freak to a legitimate leader that knows how to call the shots. She cares about those that she works with, but still has that edge to her we're familiar with, just put to a more meaningful use. Season 2 was full of Anne and Marcy interactions, but 3 is full on Anne and Sasha, so we now get a better sense of their current relationship. It's really wild going from the interactions in Season 1 and 2, to now here where both have a mutual respect for each other. It lets you take in how different the three girls play off one another. A lot of the Wartwood characters now get to have the spotlight again, like the episode Spryvy, but that one honestly might be one of the weakest of the season. It's not that bad, but the concept is super basic and predictable. Most of the jokes aren't anything special either, but I do like the part where the mailman dies. The better episode focused on town characters, if you ask me, is Sasha's Angels. It has a couple of my favorites in it, like Wally and Maddie, but surprisingly the main character of focus is Toadie, the little guy always with Mayor Toadstool, and according to Matt, they're actually lovers, holy shit. A lot of older elements from Season 1 and 2 end up coming back during these episodes. You remember those ohms that Sprig and Polly encountered during the early Season 2? Yeah, they're actually part of a civilization that created the prophecies centered around the three girls, pretty much confirming that they all have cool anime powers. That's not even me saying it in my own way, they should have called them anime powers. I love the show. There's a pretty good episode focused on Sprig and Grime, which is a fun pairing. Grime kinda just becomes one of the best characters in the show the more you watch it, and I'm not complaining at all. The mind control shrooms end up making a comeback. Honestly, I like this character for the voice alone. Domino 2 makes a glorious return. Sprig almost gets eaten. Yeah, that's all good stuff. Okay, let's talk about the Core and the King. This was one of the biggest episodes of Season 3 when it released, and for good reason. To start, Darcy is here and we now get to see what kind of character they are. It's a giant hive mind of a bunch of people throughout history, but since it's taken over Marcy's body, it's inherited a good amount of her traits. So in short, their personality is basically if Marcy was evil, and I kinda love it for that. She's the imposing leader that has control over Andrias, but she still says phrases and terms specific to Marcy that add this weirdly endearing charm to her character. That's not the main focus though. This episode's whole deal is giving the backstory on Andrias when he was younger, and showing off these Toad and Frog characters we've been getting alluded to before this. Young Andrias is voiced by Zeno Robinson, which, god damn it, already makes me inclined to like Andrias more when I'm a fan of that man's work. But speaking of voice work, shout out to Andrias' dad for having the most intimidating voice in the whole series. He's got this unparalleled growl to his delivery that immediately sells you on the fact that this guy is a big deal. This episode reveals how the music box was stolen by Leaf, a close friend of Andrias, and a pink frog that's clearly an ancestor of the Planners, but we all kinda know about that already. The story of this episode is nothing complicated, but it goes a long way in adding more depth to Andrias' character. He didn't immediately start out as an evil dictator. It's a role that he was molded into over time, and he views invading Earth as his chance to redeem himself for his failures of protecting the music box. A villain like Andrias is nothing new, but he's executed well enough, with Keith David giving a performance that really heightens his character. I don't have much to say about the episode where there's an amphibian race war, but after that, we officially enter the endgame territory, and on a very interesting note too. The beginning of the end starts with another flashback scene that highlights how both Anne and Sasha were very neglectful of Marcy's interests. She talked a bunch about the kind of stories and movies she was into, but the other two did not care in the slightest. She never stopped being herself, but there was a tinge of neglectfulness that ran within their friend group that's really interesting to take in. A core part of Amphibia is on how this group of childhood friends actually had a pretty flawed friendship despite knowing each other for so long, and it's a very relatable take on a trio of friends. Like, no matter how long you know some people, there's bound to be some bumps in the friendship that simply never get addressed, which can end up being for the worse in the long run. Amphibia understands that and creates really well written drama centered around the three girls. There's a reason they're the most popular characters in the show, and most fan art you'll find will consist of them. That's definitely the highlight aspect of this episode, which leads us to All In, and the hardest thing. All In is definitely the more action focused of the two, which works well as is the first half of the finale. That's not to say this episode isn't full of emotion either, as one of the best moments is Anne reflecting on how she didn't really appreciate herself much, but has grown a new sense of strength thanks to the people around her. It's stuff like this is why Anne is one of my favorite animated protagonists. She's not an overly optimistic and positive girl like a lot of other Disney female leads. She's a grumpy delinquent that started off not having much strength to stand up for herself. She looked for any opportunities to go for what she saw as an easier path, which would usually end up backfiring. There's this gradual shift throughout the show where you can see piece by piece how much more she matures. As the story of Amphibia becomes more mature and grounded, so does Anne as a character. This moment here really is the cap off to all that time we spent with Anne prior, and it feels so good to see. Anne's parents and Mr. X return to fighting the invasion, and it's pretty sick seeing Mom and Dad be these badass H's destroying robots. The Planners get their big moment by conquering the herons that killed Sprig and Polly's parents. I kinda popped off at them doing the dance, not gonna lie. The biggest highlight of this episode besides the Lightning McQueen car is the two big fights. Anne in her super form versus Andrias in a powered up robot suit, and Sasha and Grime versus Darcy using a Radicel scythe. And both of these fights are pretty much incredible. Anne and Andrias have this large scope fight where they're flying around Dragon Ball style and beating the absolute hell out of each other. The fight with Darcy gets way more messed up. Grime gets his arm chopped off, Sasha gets sliced to the back, this shot right here goes unreasonably hard. The true stakes of this fight come from Sasha going up against this possessed version of Marcy that knows her thoughts and memories. She likes to use that to get into Sasha's head, which acts as a great climax for Sasha's character. She's going up against someone who only knows the Sasha that would manipulate people to get what she wanted, climaxing with her final strike at Darcy's cable, finishing off this character for good. Farewell Darcy, you were fun while you lasted. Only other bit I want to point out is that I didn't know what Blackpink was before this episode dropped, but now I do, and I'll always remember them for this transition here. This right here is peak stuff. You know, for the hardest thing, I oddly don't have much to say for its first half. The moon is 100% a Majora's Mask reference, and we got this whole flashy battle with all the girls going super. But all I really have to say is that it's just fun to watch. Animation is pretty, no big deal, playing in the back is a nice touch, it's anime as all heck, Andrias gets his moment of redemption, all top-notch stuff, but all you have to do is watch it yourself to understand how good it is. The whole part of Anne coming back thanks to God's interference is kind of out of nowhere and the most Deus Ex part of this finale, but it's presented in a pretty funny way. Like, they know how ridiculous this scenario of Anne meeting God because they're desperate to retire is, and I'm just amused by the fact that Charlene Yee voices God in the universe of Amphibia. What I really want to get into is the last part of the ending. Each goodbye during this scene fits perfectly. Marcy acknowledges how little time she got to spend with Olivia and Yunnan, but they're still grateful to have met each other, with those two newts now being a couple. The farewell to Andrias getting across a very somber note with little words was a highlight. Sasha and Graham have a more comedic send-off, but it's still sad to see them part. These two were a really good duo throughout the show, and I love seeing these two badasses part in the softest way possible. Oh boy, and saying goodbye to the planners. This is definitely where the tears start to happen. God, it's hard to describe how emotional this whole scene is, but besides the fact that Anne's goodbyes to Polly, Hop Pop, and Sprig are literally perfect, with TJ Hill's score making it all come together, throughout the whole show, Amphibia let you grow close to these characters the same way Anne grew close to them. Throughout these past 3 seasons and all the adventures they've gone through, both big to the story or some little sidetrack, that connection of these 4 as a family grew. I think the 11-minute episode format of Amphibia really helped it in the long run. Without all these little episodes that let these characters simply interact and grow through shenanigans together, this farewell may not have been as powerful. Sprig breaking down while Anne is still giving her send-off to Hop Pop is so damn fitting. These two specifically have had the strongest relationship of any 2 characters in the show. While Anne was going through all that drama with her girlfriends, Sprig was always there as a dependable best friend, and Anne basically became an older sister to him. This is like legitimately the hardest goodbye moment I've ever had with an animated show, because God, the adventure with these characters really is over, huh? I could suddenly shift gears into being hyped about older designs of characters like Polly, but not today. Just know I love all these older looks for the characters in Amphibia. The fact that Andrias took to doing horticulture because of Leaf is sweet, and that statue of Anne in the center of Wartwood, perfect. When I first saw the shot of the airport, I thought we were getting some sort of scene of Anne and Sasha saying goodbye to Marcy, but once that 10 years later text hit, I realized what was going on. These older designs, oh my goodness. Marcy looks as dorky as I could ever hope for, and Sasha's outfit just hits right. The small talk about what they've been doing with their lives was short but fun. It 100% fits that Marcy would end up making a webcomic. She's too much of a nerd to not make her own comic and story. And Sasha working to help kids through their own issues is so fitting given all they went through in Amphibia. That final fucking scene though, showing what Anne is doing with her life now, being a herpetologist at an aquarium that teaches other kids about amphibians, having a whole area dedicated to Amphibia with so many of the sets of the world recreated. It fills me with so many indescribable emotions. Anne doesn't look much different from before, but she was already content with being herself. She already loves who she is. Anne's last monologue here is the perfect way to cap off the show, because at the end of the day, this was her story, but seeing all the girls reunited and hitting it off again, it shows that after all these years, they're still all close to each other no matter the time or distance. Amphibia changed their lives, and while there was a lot of traumatic events along the way, in the end, their friendship came through stronger than ever. Amphibia's finale is one of my favorites I've ever seen in a show, not only because of all the fantastic action and hype-inducing moments, but also for how it really did feel like the end of this journey that we were a part of every step of the way. This show had a clear start and a clear end that it was moving towards, and it had such a clean road there. A 3-part story that accomplished everything it wanted to do. Amphibia will go down as one of my favorite shows that I had the pleasure of following all throughout its run. It had us laughing at the silly frogs doing the funny stuff of season 1, then it had us crying tears by the end. It's gonna feel a bit weird no longer having Amphibia as a show to follow after having it as a part of my life for nearly 3 years, but I'm happy to have been there. There's still going to be other shows to follow and look forward to, no doubt, but nothing will ever replace what Amphibia is to me. And that's okay. Nothing will ever need to. Thanks for watching. Welp, that seems like a good place to call it for this video. If you enjoyed your time at all, subscribing, commenting, liking, all that junk would be appreciated. Feel free to share your own thoughts on Amphibia and how you felt about the ending. I kinda wanna get a conversation going. With all that said, thanks once again for watching, and have a good day.